Monday, September 22nd, 2025 is the 30th anniversary of the release of David Fincher's seminal Se7en. And I wanted to talk about it. Before I get there, because it's an important movie to me, you've heard me talk about it, I'll tell you why, but it actually represents a number of things. But here's my I'm going to tell the story maybe one last time, celebrating its 30th anniversary. So after I left working in feature production for Bill Young at Warner Brothers, I went over to Silver Pictures to be a reader. And to be honest, I wasn't very good as a story analyst. Not that I couldn't analyze stories, but it was the amount of work, the workload. I found it overwhelming. So at Silver Pictures, after like 6 months, there was just a pile of scripts that insulted my intelligence. And what Roy Lee is looking for is scripts that he doesn't know. So if you're reading a murder mystery, you know the mystery is going to get solved. And that means what you're buying into that's why people love procedurals. They know that with the procedural, you know how it's going to end. Well, in Roy Lee's world and in my world I'd like to live in, you don't. You start reading something you think is a procedural, you think it's one thing, and then halfway through the script, the rug will get pulled out from under you and suddenly it becomes something else entirely. And you're like, oh my God. Hence Barbarian, hence Strange Darling. These are movies that Roy discovered and found. Hence Weapons. So I start reading Se7en, and it was a really well-written script. I loved Mills and Somerset. They were great characters, and they were going after this. And in the script, just to be honest, in the script for Se7en, it was much more pulpy. Like it was much more. The murders were really bombastic. I'd call them that. That's the way I remember it. You have to remember, I read the script in 1990, 5 years before it came out, and it was very much. It was much more heightened the way I remembered it. At least in my mind, that's the way I saw it. But like one of those great Roy Lee scripts, halfway through the script, John Doe turns himself in. And I was like, that was the moment I'm like, oh my God. I had that was something new. I'd never come across that before. That here's this killer they're looking for, and he'd been watching the whole time, and he turned himself in. I couldn't believe it. And when I got to the end of Se7en, I was fucking floored. I was floored. I absolutely, I was gobsmacked. And then I went back and did something I never did. I read it again. And that's what you want. That's what everybody who's looking to buy a screenplay, to make a screenplay, that's the response that you have. Now, I would say this, I've told this people to a million times, that this is the only script ever that I read professionally, and I read over 3,000 scripts professionally. This was the only script that I ever read as a professional story analyst that I did this for. It was the only one that came across my desk that I found. I went, oh my God. And I wrote this really long, impassioned piece of coverage. Now, you're not supposed to say in coverage, yes, this movie has to be made. You have to make this movie. You have to do this. And I did. I wrote this, and I ran into work the next day. And I worked for the head of our department was a guy named Matt Tabak. And why am I drawing a blank on his name? The guy that I worked, Kevin Messick. And Kevin Messick cut me a lot of slack. Thank you, Kevin. You're a very nice guy. Because, I was always late getting in pieces of coverage because and because you'd have to send them, and sometimes they'd need them at like 3 o'clock, and I would turn it in at 4 o'clock, and because I would take time writing the coverage. But anyway, that doesn't matter. That means you can't do your job. So Se7en, it took 5 years for Se7en to get made because no one liked the ending. We all know the ending. What's in the box? Everybody wanted that ending changed. Everybody. And now, in the same year that I read Se7en, Alien 3, or maybe Alien 3 came out in 91. But Alien 3 came out soon after I had read Se7en. And David Fincher was like so wounded from the experience of making Alien 3, which, by the way, if you've never heard the tale of the making of Alien 3, you have to go. You have to watch my friend Charlie de Lauzirika's documentary on the Alien anthology. Get the Alien anthology. It has not come out in 4K yet, but his Alien, the making of Alien documentaries, Charlie made some of the finest special feature documentaries ever made, and one of the most fascinating ones is the one he made on the unmaking of Alien 3. And what's really interesting is some fans went back and even took this even further this year, but the assembly cut of Alien 3 was first finished for the Blu-ray in the Alien anthology. So go pick that up, watch the documentary on Alien 3, and you can see the horror that David Fincher faced. But he hadn't made a movie in 5 years. But he was the one that stuck to his guns and said, we have to keep this ending. The what's in the box, the Gwyneth Paltrow's, spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil the movie. If you haven't seen first of all, if you're watching this channel right now and you're watching me and you haven't seen 7, shame on you. And turn this off right now and go watch 7 before you listen to me say anything further. The opening credits for 7 there is an argument to be made that they're the greatest opening credits for any movie ever. I mean, depending on what your jam is, like I always say, I'm not everyone's jar of jam, but some people might like the opening credits of Superman more. You know, I understand that. But in terms of 7 and using 9 Inch Nails, a remix of 9 Inch Nails, I mean, it was just, come on. And then using The Heart's Filthy Lesson, using Bowie on the end titles, amazing. But when I saw 7, I at first I wasn't blown away by it because of the tone. I saw it much more as a much more pulpy movie, and it was so much to take in, and it was so relentless. But the vision was there, and I've come to. I mean, I go back to 7 many, many, many times, and the film means a great deal to me on a number of levels. It is exactly everything that I think the art of cinema. Now, it's not for everybody, obviously, but it's everything that the art of cinema is able to do that no other art form can do. Sure, you can look at paintings of someone like Francis Bacon or something and feel something from an image, but what 7 is able to do through its literary script, the literary-minded script of Andy Kevin Walker, who was very young when he wrote it, but there was a maturity, obviously this article captured it, that is in every frame of the film. And then when you had a meticulous filmmaker, I think part of the reason clearly David Fincher, with his meticulous nature, was attracted to both John Doe as a character and to Detective Somerset as a character, because even though one is perpetrating evil and one is fighting on the side of good, the meticulous nature of Fincher making the movie accentuated both characters. And it was a perfect example of a director. Because who knew? You know, after Alien 3, you can still see when you watch Alien 3, especially if you watch the assembly cut, what a craftsman David Fincher really is. And he has a very specific style. There is no other filmmaker who comes close to what David Fincher can do. It's incredible. And I mean, I would consider 7 Fincher's theatrical. It's maybe not fair, but he kind of disowns Alien 3. And when you watch, I think it's called Rape and Ruin, which is the name of the documentary on the making of it, you can see how much of a craftsman he is. And it's too bad that he wasn't allowed to stay on the film and that it was basically taken away from him. It was a tragedy. But the comeback, I mean, he could have left the business and never come back. But 7 is him roaring back to life and giving us, you know, I consider 7 not necessarily a crime procedural. I consider it more of a horror film. It's sort of a hybridization, the way Alien is both a monster movie and a science fiction film. 7, I think, and it was much emulated and copied. Like I said, that Resurrection, another biblically themed serial killer movie that Leland Orser is in. It was so influential. I still marvel at it 30 years later, and it's why I love movies so much.